Julia Cho, you co-wrote the Pixar animated film Turning Red about a girl who undergoes a unique kind of puberty where she periodically turns into a red panda. How did you come to be involved in the film?
Well, I was actually working at Pixar. I'd come to work on another film, and then I sort of transitioned off that and wasn't sure what I would do after that. But while I was there, I had seen this amazing short, Bow. I had seen it in the theater at Pixar, and I just remember just weeping afterwards. And I didn't know Domi then, but I remember accosting her in one of the little employee areas and being like, that movie. And I probably cried on her then too. And it was just the truthfulness of how much her work spoke to me. And then it just turned out that then when she needed a writer again for her project, that I was lucky enough to be invited to be part of that possibility. And I just was so excited to have the chance to work with her specifically. And so then we just started working together on this idea that she had. It had already progressed to a certain point, and it was already amazing with just this incredibly like vibrant relationship between this mother and daughter. So from that point forward, it was just a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with just the weird and wonderful and just brilliant mind of Domi.
And you've written, plays also in live action TV. How different is the experience writing for animation?
It is very different. At the same time, it feels like I didn't realize at the time that moving from genre to genre, I think I was developing a certain toolbox without really realizing it. And I think that it's not necessarily to the entire genre of animation, but I think something about the process of Pixar, the way they make movies, I felt like I was suddenly realizing, oh, I have these tools. Like I do know how to work with actors or, help with casting from theater and from TV. I do know how to work with a director collaboratively. I've been working with showrunners for years. So I felt like just bit by bit, it was also giving me new tools, but also giving me a way to just cohere all these things that I had been doing separately for so long. And so there was a real synthesis I felt of the work I had done previously in different genres and settings.
And as you mentioned, working with Domi Shi, who's also the director. What's like? Yeah, as you mentioned, working with directors, you're used to that. What's that collaboration like? Writing the script with the director.
Well, with Domi, it was a lot of time just spent getting to know her. I remember early on we would just have lunches, and when I first started, it was just the two of us, and so there was a kind of a luxury of just spending time, not even talking directly about the movie, but just about our experiences. I think sort of naturally, of course, we started with our own mother, daughter relationships. And then I also felt like I could bring to that the fact that I was a mom and also could see it from that angle as well. So we talked a lot about our moms, our families, and all of that was just happening around the time we actually spent in the room talking about this story and the plot and the mechanics of it. But the two things really spoke to each other. And I feel like, what was really lovely about that time, when I think about it in the beginning, it was just like paid dividends, because then even years later, like literally years later, we could be stuck on a story point and I could be like, remember that story about the time that, you had that fight, or I would bring up a story. And so it just created a bed of stories and memories and things that we could just refer back to, even when we were in like really technical territory about trying to fix a story point. So it's really a wonderful way to collaborate, because it was just a rich and very nuanced collaboration, because we were spending so much time together, and that we got to know each other in a fuller way than just if we had gone together just to work together, on a project.
And on animation, does the writing and the animating sort of are they happening in tandem, or does the script need to be sort of locked in before that work gets done?
The script is never locked, it seems. I think that there was most of the process was not so much animation, because animation is sort of a later part of the pipeline. But early on, there was, after the first draft of the script, that was probably the only time that there was a discrete script writing time. After that, then it moves into a part of the production where there's a story team of incredible story artists who then board your script. So then the script is no longer just in script form. It starts to become a visual entity. And that becomes very fluid, because the script scenes are being handed off to these incredible artists who are then bringing their ideas and their creativity to it and coming up with things that you didn't anticipate. And then that's informing your next rewrite of the script. And so it kind of started flowing back and forth between script and story. And I felt after a while like an honorary member of the story department, like the only member who couldn't draw, but felt sort of adopted by them, like they're like little stray, like because I'm the only writer on the project, but I kind of exist as a team member, through the story department was sort of how I felt about it.
One thing that I liked about this film, and that I'm seeing a lot in animation lately, is that it's a story with no real villains. It's entirely about relationships and how people, kind of reconcile those. What do you think about, how much, nuanced sophistication we're getting to see in these stories through animation?
That's a great point, because I too have sort of noticed this trend away from cardboard villains or just like people who are just bad for no reason. I think that it speaks to the ways in which like empathy has become so important in our culture, but also in our storytelling, and that you can't really get away, I think, with one-dimensional characters, good or bad. So I felt like, with Ming, we were always really careful with the mother character that she was definitely an obstruction to the main character and everything she wanted. But yeah, she couldn't be a villain because she's a mom, she loves her daughters. So I think that we always knew, okay, we don't have like your classic villain. But I think what I found interesting was that you still needed an antagonist. So I guess we're in this world of storytelling right now where there aren't really villains, but there are still formidable antagonists. And I think part of the fun of a character like Ming is that it's her love that makes her an antagonist. The kind of paradox of that was kind of a wonderful gift, because she could act so badly, but because you knew how much she loved her daughter, it wasn't exactly excusable, but it was understandable. And I think that to your question about like how that storytelling and emerging in animation, I think there's definitely complexity to animated stories as well. I think people point to the fact that our culture, American culture, is not we think of it as stories for children, but there are other cultures in Asia or elsewhere that consider animation a storytelling genre for everyone. And so many of us adult watchers of animation still, I think, have like an appreciation and love for Miyazaki films or for some of the Pixar films. So for me coming in, I never approached it like I was writing the story just for children. The way ideally I think of it is that, all of us have a part of ourselves that maybe is our truest part that has been there since childhood. Like we're born with it. That's who we are. And that part doesn't change however old we are. And in fact, I think that part of us maybe comes out clearest when we're children. So for us, ideally, it's let's tell a story for that person, that ageless person who's there from the beginning and is there no matter how old we get.
Another thing that's great with animation is that, it's almost like if you can see it, you can create it, or if you can imagine it, you can create it. Is that especially freeing to go into a script knowing that, was the sky the limit, or were there any limitations?
You would think that the sky is the limit, but I think animation is so funny because it overturns all of your assumptions about what is hard and what isn't hard. Because in animation, you're like in live action, you would be like, I need 1,000-foot red panda. Live action would be like, okay, that's going to be a big budget item, right? And then in animation, it was sort of like, can we have girls like touching their hair, like putting their hair, like the interface between hand and hair, very expensive, right? So it was just like, oh, like earrings are hard, like in animation, yes, very hard to do dangling things, like so it's really funny because in many ways the sky was the limit in terms of imagination, like large kaiju battle, trashing all of Toronto. But then there were some like really simple things like every kid needs a backpack. Oh, every kid needs a backpack, because everything has to be built and made. So it just kind of was funny how it turned your idea of like, what is hard? What is, expensive or ambitious? And I think for us, what was ambitious was actually telling a middle school tale with all of the details of middle school life. Like that was, I think, the more ambitious part rather than the 1,000-foot tall red panda.
Well, congratulations on the film, and thank you so much for talking to me about it. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.